Hey everyone, my name is Sophie from Sophisticated Organization. Welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be another fall meal prep. So I did one, like a month or so back to kick fall off, but now we are really in the throes of fall. It's October, things are actually getting colder. So I have some cozy soup recipes, a grilled cheese, a banana bread, some granola, a whole bunch of meal prep ideas that you can freeze or just prep in advance that are perfect for fall. So if you're ready for it, then let's jump right into the video. Today's first recipe is maple quinoa granola. Now this is a great one to prep in advance. I love having homemade granola on hand just for snacking to top on yogurt. Sometimes I like it with milk and a little bit of fruit. And this quinoa granola is a little unique, really healthy, lots of nuts and whole grains. So you're gonna start by adding 2.5 cups of oats to your mixing bowl. Then add half of a cup of quinoa, just raw. You don't need to cook it or anything like that in advance. And then 1 cup of raw nuts. So I'm doing half a cup of almonds and half a cup of walnuts. Next up, add a half cup of shredded coconut. This should be the unsweetened type. You don't need all that sugar in here. And a 1/4 cup of chia seeds. Next up is all of the different spices. You need 2 teaspoons of ground cinnamon, half a teaspoon of salt, 1/3 cup maple syrup, 3 tablespoons of melted coconut oil. So I'm going to stick that in the microwave to get that nice and melty so it blends in well. And while I do that, I'm adding in 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract, 3 tablespoons of molasses. And finally, once I add in the coconut milk and blend that all together, I'm going to add 1 egg white that I've whipped up a little bit too. Once everything's all mixed up, you'll add your mixture onto a parchment-lined baking sheet. Put it into the oven at 300 degrees in the center rack. Bake it for about 20 minutes. Then take it out of the oven, give it a good stir and make sure everything gets all mixed up, and add it back into the oven with everything still in a single layer again for another 15 or 20 minutes until the granola looks golden brown. While it's in there cooking, I'm gonna get my mix-ins ready, and you can really get creative with these. I did a mixture of dried figs and raisins, and the figs were so delicious. If you haven't had dried figs before, I would definitely recommend it. But you can add other things like chocolate chips, cranberries, apricots, cherries, or really any other dried fruit or anything you like in your granola.
Of all the magic places in the world I've been to, this is where my heart is. Oh, you know it's true. No matter where I go, I'm coming home to you.
Once the granola is done, you can pull it out of the oven and let it sit on a cooling rack to cool completely. You want to make sure it cools completely so it forms those granola clusters. And once it's completely cooled, then you can carefully mix it around and kind of crumble the granola. And I'm just going to put it in a Tupperware container to store. You should be able to store it for 2 weeks at room temperature, or you can freeze it for up to 2 whole months. So it's a great thing to put in your freezer as well.
And one day she said, write me a love song, 'cause I know you'll make it beautiful. And maybe I'll call you my sweetheart, and promise nobody can steal me away. Then I am yours, 'cause I want you and I wanted you to know.
The next recipe is a whole wheat blueberry banana bread. And I like this one because it's whole wheat. I really like extra fruit. Usually I do chocolate chips in my banana bread, but this one feels like a healthier banana bread compared to what I usually make because of the whole wheat and then replacing the chocolate chips with blueberries. Now with this recipe, you can also add in walnuts, but I chose not to. I really don't like nuts in my banana bread, so I opted to skip that. But the first thing you're going to do is start with 1.5 cups of mashed overripe bananas. That's about 3 or 4 bananas. If your bananas are smaller, I would go for 4. But mash those together while you're heating up 2 tablespoons of coconut oil.
I am yours, 'cause I want you and I wanted you to know.
Into your bowl, you're going to add 1/2 cup of maple syrup, 1/4 cup of non-fat plain Greek yogurt, and I have that in a bowl with my bananas and 1 large egg.
Under the moonlight as they kept on dancing.
I'm going to mix it all together, and then you can add in 1.5 teaspoons of vanilla extract, your 2 tablespoons of coconut oil now that it's melted. Keep mixing it together, and then I'm also adding in my dry ingredients, so 1 teaspoon of baking soda, 1/4 teaspoon of salt, 1/4 teaspoon of ground cinnamon, and finally the last thing you're going to add in is 1.5 cups of whole wheat flour, and I used white whole wheat flour.
As a young girl, the fields were mine. We played hide and seek for hours, raised our shadows among the...
With the batter completely mixed, you'll add in about 3/4 cup of blueberries, gently fold them in, and add it to your greased baking loaf. And then you can top the loaf off with even more blueberries. There should be about 1 cup of blueberries in total in your and on top of your banana bread.
Take me back, all the way back to them days, running around in a gown and a crown, barefoot.
So I'm going to put that in the oven. The oven is set at 350 degrees, and I am going to bake it for 35 minutes. Then you can come back and check on it. If it's starting to look nice and brown on top, cover it with some tin foil and bake it for another 25 to 35 minutes. As usual with all breads, I like to stick a toothpick in there to make sure it comes out clean without any sticky dough on it. That's how I know it's done, and then set it out to cool.
Take me back, all the way back to them days, running around in a gown and a crown, barefoot.
Next up is the roasted parsnip apple soup. This is a soup that really makes me think of fall. I will say it's probably not a soup that everyone will love. You have to really like parsnips to like this soup. So if you like that root vegetable flavor, this will be a soup that you like. But if it's not your thing, then I would definitely skip this one. It's one of those recipes that I really liked, but my husband Jim was not as much of a fan.
Back to them days,
The first thing you're going to do for the soup is take 2.5 pounds of parsnips. That's probably about 10 or so, and get them peeled and cut them into 1/2-inch slices. You also need 2 large Granny Smith apples, peeled, cored, and cut into slices as well.
It's 2 a.m. and I can't fall asleep 'cause I'm not tired.
So if you see me chit-chatting while I'm cooking right now, I was actually FaceTiming a friend back from Denver. If you don't know, I recently moved from Denver, Colorado to Omaha, Nebraska. So I'm missing a lot of my friends in Denver and was FaceTiming one of them, and she asked to see how my baby bump was looking. So I had to show her a little view of the bump and give her an update on that. But it's fun for me to be able to FaceTime my friends and feel like I'm still staying in touch even though I live a state away now.
I just miss you. I just miss you. We were such a constellation, right? No, you'd agree. Made a reputation for ourselves at age 18. We had the devil on our shoulders telling us what we should do. I wonder if you think about me too. I can hear the raindrops falling. It's cold outside and I kinda feel like calling, but it's too late now. I just miss you. I just miss you. Oh, I miss you.
After a lot of chopping and peeling, I have all of those apples and parsnips in there. So I'm also going to add in 1 medium yellow onion, as well as 2 cloves of garlic into this bowl. And then you're going to take all of the items that you've chopped with the garlic and add it with some olive oil onto a sheet pan to roast in the oven. Don't forget to toss a little bit of salt on it as well, and a teaspoon of thyme and a 1/4 teaspoon of pepper. So this should roast in the oven at 400 degrees for about half an hour. Turn it a couple of times throughout and you'll have nice roasted vegetables. Once they're done, let them cool just a little bit and get out either an immersion blender, or you can transfer them into a blender like my Vitamix. This does a great job with heartier vegetables, but they are nice and soft after roasting in the oven. So I'm adding them in batches along with my wet ingredients to make sure it blends nicely. So you're gonna need in total 4 cups of chicken broth, or you could replace it with vegetable broth if you are vegan or vegetarian. This soup doesn't have any meat in it, so you could easily opt for vegetable broth. And I'm also adding in total 1 cup of unsweetened almond milk.
I regret what I said, didn't mean it. Yeah, believe me, I guess I take it back. There's a party downtown, someone said that you're coming by. I know that summer was a big mistake.
Once that's all blended, you can add in a 1/4 teaspoon of ground nutmeg, and you're also going to need 1 tablespoon of maple syrup to add a little bit of extra sweetness, and then transfer the whole thing to a large pot and heat up your soup, and you're good to go. You can always add in more milk if you want it creamier, or if you'd like to thin it out a little bit, you could add some more broth.
Let you down. We're spinning around, losing our minds. And if we do, and if we don't, and if we give in what we want to what we want.
I thought this soup would pair nicely with a grilled cheese. So I tried to find a fall inspired grilled cheese. So I'm making this onion and apple grilled cheese, which really turned out great. Even though, again, my husband Jim didn't love the apple and parsnip soup, he was a fan of the grilled cheese, and it's kind of a unique one. I wouldn't even call it a grilled cheese. It's more of a grilled sandwich because it's such a twist on a grilled cheese.
We couldn't keep our hands away from each other. Did you ever tell her I have to sleep in the bed I made? I don't sleep much at all these days.
I'm just chopping up 2 yellow onions nice and thin so I can start to roast them. I added some butter into my pan, 3/4 cup apple cider. I'm also adding salt and pepper, of course, and slowly roasting that stuff down.
And I always pick you up and let you down. We're spinning around, losing our minds. And if we do, and if we don't, and if we give in what we want to what we want, to what we want, to what we want.
You'll also want to add in a tablespoon of fresh thyme and a tablespoon of chopped sage leaves and some crushed red pepper. So I'm adding that in as it starts to reduce and really turn into these beautiful caramelized onions. I took those off the stove. Then I started to prepare my prosciutto. This is optional. You don't have to put prosciutto in here. Again, if you're vegetarian, you don't have to add this. If you're vegan, this probably isn't the recipe for you because there's a lot of cheese coming. But we opted for the prosciutto, so I'm crisping that up on both sides and then going to pull that off and prep my sandwiches.
Around, losing our minds. And if we do, and if we don't, and if we give in what we want to what we want.
These sandwiches just need a drizzle of olive oil on both sides of the bread, and then you can start layering them. So first I'm throwing down the prosciutto and then my caramelized onions, followed by a mixture of shredded fontina cheese and Gouda cheese. Let me tell you, was that an awesome mixture. Finally, I'm topping it off with thin slices of Honeycrisp apple and then going to cook that up on the skillet.
We've been here before. Tell me again, just tell me again, and I'll make it right. Don't go through that door.
Now, this is a recipe that I will say is not necessarily a fall meal prep. You can't really freeze these or anything like that, but you can prep sandwiches ahead of time. The apple and parsnip soup would be a great one to freeze in advance, and then you could just whip up some grilled cheese alongside it or another sandwich or anything like that. But I couldn't help myself with this grilled cheese.
Something isn't right. Tell me again what I'm missing. 'Cause you're
Last but not least, because I really do like this recipe, this is a take on a chicken pot pie, and it's not necessarily a traditional chicken pot pie in the sense that it's baked in a crust, but it has all of those classic chicken pot pie flavors. I grabbed a large Dutch oven and added some extra virgin olive oil on the bottom of it, followed by 8 ounces of mushrooms, 2 teaspoons of garlic powder, a teaspoon of salt, half a teaspoon of dried thyme, half a teaspoon of dried sage, a 1/4 teaspoon of pepper, followed by 3 stalks of celery chopped up nice and small. You really want everything to look like it's starting to brown. Continue to mix it up, and then once it looks like everything's nice and cooked, you can add in 1/4 cup of flour. Mix that together, and then the base of this soup is almond milk, so add in 2 full cups of unsweetened almond milk. You'll also need 1 14.5-ounce can of low sodium chicken broth. It helps if you add the almond milk slowly so it doesn't get too lumpy. So add a little bit at a time and mix it up, and then continue to add more. Followed by about 2 cups of Yukon potatoes. Cover the pot almost fully and let it simmer for about 10 minutes before you add in your frozen mixed vegetables. Finally, you just continue to let that soup warm up until it's nice and thick, probably about 15 minutes, and then you can add in shredded chicken. The soup is pretty thick because it is kind of a pot pie type soup, and you can add in more almond milk if you want to thin it out a bit. I opted to stick all of this into my super cubes to freeze it into individual portions for later. This is great in the freezer. It should last 3 months. And if you put it in the refrigerator, it should last about 4 or so days. Whenever you're ready to heat it up, I would add some croutons on top, and then it really gets that pot pie type feel to it because it has that bread.
Here we are in the car. Let me see who you are, who you really are.
Thanks for sticking with me and watching today's video. I hope you give some of these recipes a try. Let me know in the comments below if you plan to try them. If you do try them, tag me on Instagram. If you try them and want to take a photo and share with me, I would love to see. So I'm excited that I have a few things prepped for the week ahead, but also for my freezer stash. That'll be very helpful, especially when I'm postpartum here in the not too distant future. If you liked today's video, I'd appreciate if you gave it a thumbs up. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Hit that notification bell so you're notified every time I post a new video. And until next time, I will see you guys later.